my name is Avni Kapoor. I lead the Accountability Initiative Research Group within the Center for Policy Research. We've been doing a lot of work on tracking social sector policies, as well as the implementation on the ground. In some ways, we've been focusing on what we've called now responsive governance, which includes both governments as well as citizens. And so how can we play that intermediary role of ensuring that governments are responsible and responsive to citizens, and similarly, citizens know how to engage with government given their constraints as well.
So a lot of what Accountability Initiative does is fiscal analysis of budgets. And I know that you did an analysis of state budgets. Here in the United States, there is major concern that some states are not going to have enough money in the coming months to pay for essential services. Some states, like California, where we're based, had a large surplus, and that has now dwindled. Other states were in a precarious position before this even began. From my skimming of your analysis, it sounds like India is in a somewhat similar position. So I'm curious, what ought to be done for state governments to be able to function?
No, definitely. States are in a really precarious position, and they were in a precarious position even before. I think one of the biggest challenges, and that's why states have been up in arms almost, and that's what I meant in terms of sometimes crisis is an opportunity to centralize, but that has really dangerous repercussions in the long run. So we have seen some bit of attempts to centralize, and so like, for example, the recent fiscal stimulus announcement that was made, so far, most of the announcements hadn't dealt with the state revenue side of it. This one at least spoke about it, but again, it's been linked to conditionalities. So states can borrow, so there was a borrowing limit of 3% of your state's GDP, which has now been increased to 5%, but even there, conditionalities have been placed that you have to fulfill certain reforms in order to access those funds, and performance linked. So states have been up in arms saying, you can't dictate to us how we should kind of figure out our revenue and expenditure, especially since most of the expenditure happens at the state level. What we've been arguing for, not just at Accountability Initiative, but I think the whole of CPR, we've pretty much been arguing that now is the time when the center has to ensure that resources flow to the states. And the center definitely has much more powers in the constitution as well that the states don't have. So whether it's through borrowing, whether it's through other monetary and fiscal policy, just make sure that funds flow to the states, because they're the ones who are going to be dealing with all the migrants who are coming in. They're the ones who are have to ensure that all the relief, all the food, all the healthcare is provided to the citizens that are in their states.
So that would be a consolidation, or it sounds like there's a risk or a chance that consolidation of administrative power might happen.
Yeah.
What about consolidation of political power? I have been reading a narrative of global politics in which COVID is not great for populist leaders because they tend to not have the relationships with the scientific community and other experts that are really needed as part of the response. So I've read that critique when it comes to Boris Johnson in the UK, Trump in the US, Bolsonaro in Brazil. Modi, a lot of people described as a populist leader, but from what I've read, his popularity ratings are higher than ever. So what is your political read on that level of support and Modi's response to the crisis?
I think the narrative that and to some degree it's true. India did do a lockdown way before some of the other countries, and so of course there was this feeling that the Prime Minister took the right step at the right time. I think some of that has now been declining. So I think that initially the way that the lockdown was announced, there were attempts to engage with people by getting them to do certain tasks. So one Sunday, everyone was asked to come on to their balcony and ring, make some noise in support of all the police and all the medical staff and others in the front line. At one point, there was an activity given of switching off your lights and lighting diyas. And I think that kind of community building was definitely emphasized, especially in the first month of lockdown. And from what I heard from some of my, I think both in terms of reading, but also from some of the people I know, is that people like that. It felt like we were all in it together. We had there was this leader who was saying that I'm taking charge. We're going to make sure that COVID, by locking down at the right time, we're going to make sure that COVID is not going to get to us the way it's getting to many of the other countries. And of course, some of the numbers in some of the other countries were staggering. And in that sense, India's numbers always looked like, oh, we're much better off. I think now some of that is starting to fade, just because I think for India in particular, there hasn't been an attempt after the first few weeks and after the first phase of lockdown to actually talk to the citizens to understand, so what did lockdown achieve? And in some ways, I think lots of people have been arguing that the economic and social costs far outweigh almost the health costs or health returns from imposing a lockdown for as long as we did. Especially given that data doesn't exist and the numbers don't exist, and then you have these terrible visuals of migrant workers. I think the migrant worker story in particular, I think kind of broke that popularity to some degree, because I think no one really bothered asking them whether they wanted to stick around. I think there was just so much attempt saying we will make sure that they get ration and we'll do XYZ for them, but many of them just wanted to go home and be with their families. I don't think in my lifetime or anyone's lifetime we've had a pandemic that has been so global, so cross-cutting. And so the repercussions are going to stay for a really long time. I'll speak about the negative first because I want to end on the positives. But on the negative side, I think everyone's been saying this. We are going to go back a few years. Many are saying a decade in some of the progress we've made. 1,000 people non-COVID times a day died of tuberculosis in India. Now a lot of this kind of healthcare is being completely ignored. In education, schools have been shut. What does that mean to families when schools even reopen? I think the progress we made on enrollment is going to go down. So we finally transitioned to talking about learning levels, but now we're going to go back to saying, how do we get people back into schools? Because I think that's going to take a while. And across the board, I think for inequality is going to definitely rise. Poverty is definitely going to rise. We're already seeing the consequences of hunger. On the positive side, I think technology is going to be something that's definitely going to, I think the rapid advancement that we're going to make technologically, and this is across India, I think that would have taken us much longer. Everyone's had to adapt. It's been fascinating to read some of the interviews of the frontline functionaries, that even they are suddenly now, everyone's going to have to adapt in terms of how do you look at a tablet, how do you use a tablet to teach someone else. And so technology wise, I think we will see lots of innovation. I think even innovations in terms of the medical side, I do see, so not just the vaccine itself, but just other attempts of medically coming up with different innovations. I also think that what's been great for India in some ways is that I think a crisis sometimes lays bare the state capacity issues. So it's given us a sense of how many people we were already excluding even without a crisis.